Hello again, everyone. If I could get your attention. Hello, thank you. I hope you're enjoying your salads and the first few bites of your lunch. And we are going to now begin our formal program. We're obviously very excited to hear from Ambassador Cohen today, and following his remarks, he will join Denise Ciele for a Q&A session on stage here. But first, it's my privilege to invite Daniel Lauzon of CAE to the podium to introduce His Excellency. Many of you will know Dan from his over 20 years of public service in this town, including as a Chief of Staff to two Foreign Affairs Ministers. He now serves as the Senior Director of Public Affairs and Policy for CAE. Please join me in welcoming Daniel to the stage to introduce the Ambassador.
Bonjour à tous. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, members of Tribal Council, members of the board, friends, and representative of government, and of course, representatives from CAE. Ambassador Cohen, happy Halloween, sir. Many people told me I should dress up for this occasion, and that perhaps it was my 4-year-old suggested Elsa from Frozen. I went a different way, so you may not know that I am in costume. The blue jacket, the white shirt, the red tie, this is my best impression of a congressman, sir. So this is the... and embarrassingly, I see that a lot of you had the same idea tonight, or this evening. But sir, it's my tremendous honor to be introducing you in this room, in which you need no introduction, and to be doing it on behalf of CAE. As a proudly Canadian headquartered global company, I feel as though we're experiencing the best of what a truly great economic and bilateral partnership can accomplish. In fact, allow me a shameless plug. Our President and CEO, Marc Parent, will be taking this very stage next week on November 9th to talk about CAE's proud history and our role in extending Canada's influence around the world. And here's a little known fact. The last time you took a flight anywhere in the world, chances are your pilot or co-pilot was trained by CAE on simulators and on technology and expertise that was developed right on the island of Montreal. And here's another fact, is that through CAE and Defence and Security, we train every Canadian military pilot in Canada. And an even lesser known fact is that we are involved in training all U.S. military pilots, thanks to a special security agreement with your country, sir. And that fact, to me, really exemplifies the extraordinary nature of the friendship and the depth of the partnership between Canada and the United States. And I want to thank you, Ambassador Cohen, for your central role in deepening and defending that partnership every day. As you would expect from any U.S. ambassador, David Cohen has a direct line to the White House and earned the trust of President Biden long ago. And what is also critical to his success, in my opinion, is his time as an executive and advisor in both the private and public sectors and at various orders of government. Whether as a senior executive at Comcast, his career in law, or as Chief of Staff to the Mayor of Philadelphia, his advice has been sought after and heeded throughout his career. This is true in the nonprofit sector as well, with his work at the University of Pennsylvania, the Greater Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce, and the Philadelphia Theatre Company. And this is all experience on which he counts every day to manage what I and many others believe is the most important economic and diplomatic relationship and people-to-people relationship in the world. Mesdames et messieurs, sans plus tarder, it is my distinct honor and privilege to welcome His Excellency, the Ambassador of the United States of America to Canada, David Cohen.
So thanks very much. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks to all of you for coming. Thanks to CAE, AWS, and all the sponsors. for making this possible. Thanks, Jeff, to the club for inviting me. This is just a great opportunity, and looks to me like a pretty good turnout, and I like to say sometimes timing is everything. Probably a good time for me to be here today to talk about these issues. I'm particularly honored, by the way, to join the Canadian Club of Ottawa this month as you celebrate the 120th anniversary of your founding. So it's nice to be here in an anniversary year. So I've had the privilege of serving as the United States Ambassador to Canada as President Biden's personal representative to this great country for nearly 2 years now, and it really is the honor of a lifetime. One of my top priorities, and one of the top priorities of the Biden-Harris administration, has been rebuilding and solidifying the close relationship between the United States and Canada that, frankly, withered a bit during the last administration. And a critical part of that effort is to restore the trust that historically existed between our two countries. When I first arrived here, the most common refrain I heard from everyone I met, elected officials, the media, corporate executives, just regular people who I'd run into in hotel lobbies. I used to be able to say in taxis, but I don't really drive in taxis now. My security detail would not be happy about that. Was what happened? We used to be your best friend. Did we do something wrong? And it broke my heart. It really did. So I undertook the rebuilding of trust as something that, as the U.S. Ambassador to Canada, I could actually do something about. And as part of my efforts to accomplish that, I have made a conscious effort to get out of Ottawa, to get out of what I call the Ottawa bubble, and visit as much of the vast country of Canada as I can. Now, my team tells me that I have traveled more than 120,000 kilometers from coast to coast to coast. I didn't know what that meant until I actually started traveling around this country. I visited all 7 consulates of the United States Embassy and all of the consular districts, more than once each. And I've been to every province in this magnificent country. And I'm well on my way to making my way through all the territories as well. All of this delivers on my first rule of diplomacy, showing up. I'm convinced that if you show up, you can accomplish a lot of things before you even take any action. My travels have given me the opportunity to host and attend hundreds of meetings and events and meet thousands of people from all walks of life, in their businesses, in their homes, in their community centers, in restaurants in their local communities, and even in their hockey rinks and curling clubs. Overall, I think the state of the U.S.-Canada relationship is genuinely excellent. The strength of the relationship and the closeness of our partnership in the trade, defense, and security context is bound together by our shared values and so many friendships between individual citizens living on both sides of the border. That close relationship was really driven home by President Biden's extraordinary visit to Canada in March of this year. The warmth of all of his meetings and greetings, the respect among leaders, the consistent message of friendship and allyship were all enduring hallmarks of the visit. The President's visit was an opportunity to reflect on 2 years of progress under the roadmap for a renewed U.S.-Canada partnership, the comprehensive framework for our relationship that was announced by President Biden and Prime Minister Trudeau in February 2021. We have truly made great strides toward accomplishing the goals within its pillars here at home in North America and globally. For example, we have successfully taken on the pandemic. We're making real progress in building back better. And note that pillar doesn't talk about building our economy back after the pandemic. It talks about building it back better, which means building it back in a more inclusive fashion so that all segments of society have the opportunity to participate in the recovery, and that the recovery will extend to small and medium-sized enterprises who were hit hardest by the ravages of the pandemic. We've reinforced our resilient supply chains. We've upped our game on fighting climate change. We've enhanced our cooperation on defense and security, including through commitments and plans to modernize NORAD, the world's only binational defense command. And we're leading a coalition of the world's democracies to support Ukraine and now to support Israel as well. President Biden noted our strong and enduring partnership when he addressed Parliament during his visit to Ottawa. And I quote now, "Our destinies are intertwined and they're inseparable," he said, not because of the inevitability of geography, but because it's a choice we've made again and again. And I would add, a choice that we will continue to make, working together to improve our people's lives in Canada and the United States, and to preserve and grow principles of democracy throughout the world. We're tied together by trade. A truly incredible 3.25 billion Canadian dollars plus in goods and services cross our shared border every day. $3.25 billion a day, generating or supporting millions of jobs in both of our countries. This makes Canada the #1 trading partner for the United States, and it makes the United States the #1 trading partner for Canada. In addition, more than 30 U.S. states count Canada as their #1 export destination. We're bound together by treaties, but more importantly, we're bound together by our shared democratic values and our commitments to continental security and, of course, to NATO. Our countries come together on the world stage as neighbors, partners, friends, and allies, committed to making life better for people in both of our countries and building a more free, equitable, secure, and prosperous world. In this time of change and great challenges, when the world is facing significant issues, our partnership and global leadership are more important than ever. So before I continue, I can't talk about the changing world without pausing to note the appalling attacks by Hamas terrorists against Israel, including brutal attacks targeting civilians, civilian communities, and children. You have to call out terrorism when it's terrorism, and Hamas is terrorists. It is terrorism. Proud to work for a president who has consistently articulated that value. He hasn't bowed to any pressure that anyone has tried to apply elsewhere. The United States unequivocally condemns these attacks. There's never any justification for terrorism. The United States continues to stand in solidarity with the government and the people of Israel and supports Israel's right to defend itself against these attacks consistent with international law. At the same time, and this is where the subtlety and I think the majesty of the values of the United States comes in, as Israel pursues its legitimate right to defend its people and its country, and in trying to ensure that this never happens again, it is vitally important that all of us look out for civilians. And we're working together to do exactly that. In particular, working to establishing safe areas in Gaza and working on establishing corridors so that humanitarian assistance can reach people who need it. None of us wants to see sufferings by civilians on any side. by Israeli civilians or by Palestinian civilians, or whether it's anywhere else. And we're working together to do our best to protect all civilians. Importantly, as President Biden and Secretary of State Blinken have made clear, we also stand with the Palestinian people. As President Biden said, all of us recognize the legitimate aspirations of the Palestinian people, and we support equal measures of justice and freedom for Israelis and Palestinians alike. Hamas does not represent those aspirations or the Palestinian people, and it offers nothing for the Palestinian people other than more terror and bloodshed, unquote. There is a clear and compelling bottom line here. As President Biden said in his address to the American people earlier this month, we cannot give up on peace. We cannot give up on a two-state solution. Israel and the Palestinians equally deserve to live in safety, dignity, and peace. And I couldn't be prouder than the words that he uses to articulate that each and every day. The assault on Israel follows nearly 20 months of war, tragedy, and brutality inflicted on the people of Ukraine since Vladimir Putin launched his illegal invasion, violating the central pillar of the UN Charter, respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all nations. Since Putin began his illegal war of choice in February 2022, the United States and Canada have provided billions of dollars of security, financial, energy, and humanitarian assistance to Ukraine. We've worked closely on the procurement of desperately needed military equipment for Ukraine, including vital air defense systems. And the United States and Canada have welcomed hundreds of thousands of displaced Ukrainians to our countries. The United States alone has provided almost $44 billion in military assistance to Ukraine, more than all other allies and partners worldwide combined. We remain in close coordination with our allies and friends, and our support for Ukraine is absolute. We will continue to support Ukraine for as long as it takes. I am particularly proud of the way the United States and Canada have come together in support of the people of Ukraine in standing up for their country and their democracy. So the climate crisis presents another urgent challenge with wide-ranging implications for global economic and energy security. To meet this challenge, the United States and Canada and other like-minded countries must cooperate on developing new clean energy resources and technologies. This is a prime example of the complementary nature of the U.S.-Canada trade and security relationship. The issue of critical minerals is at the heart of the energy transition. Critical minerals are essential for fueling that transition, and access to critical minerals, from extraction to processing to manufacturing from North American and friendly nation sources, is a critical matter of energy security. According to the International Energy Agency, demand for most minerals essential to the clean energy transition will increase 4 to 6 times over the next decade and a half. For some minerals, the increase will be exponential. And I suspect everyone in this room knows we have a problem. Simply put, we don't have enough of these minerals available today to meet the world's and our own growing demand, and our current supply chain for these minerals, from extraction to production to recycling, is simply not diverse enough for the future that's coming. We're too reliant on too few geopolitically unreliable countries. I don't need to remind you of what happens when the supply chain breaks down. We lived through that during the pandemic, and nobody wants to live through that again. But this problem is not just about supply chains. It's also about security. As it stands today, China plays an outsized role in the critical minerals industry at every step along the supply chain. This is particularly true when it comes to mining and refining. According to a 2022 Brookings Institution report, China refines 68% of all nickel globally, 40% of copper, 59% of lithium, and 73% of cobalt. China also accounts for more global production of mineral-rich components for battery cells. Most significantly, China holds 78% of the world's cell manufacturing capacities for electric vehicle batteries, which are essential for a transition to electric batteries as we try and wean ourselves off of fossil fuels. Given the current state of play, the status quo will not provide the energy security that Canada, the United States, or our democratic friends and allies need for our cleaner energy future. So the good news is that we've all woken up to the fact that we have a problem. And now we're trying to put ideas into action to address that issue. Ideas that are fueled by the bipartisan infrastructure law, the Inflation Reduction Act, known as the IRA in the United States, and the critical minerals strategy in Canada. Simply put, we need to help each other to make this possible, to drive demand for electric vehicles, to help fund critical mineral mining, and to move manufacturing, refining, and mining back to North America in a responsible way. The United States and Canada are investing billions to make all that happen. While in Ottawa, President Biden spoke about what the future holds for our partnership. He said, "It's a future built on shared prosperity, where Canada and the United States continue to anchor the most competitive, prosperous, and resilient economic region in the world." That's why President Biden and Prime Minister Trudeau have pledged to work together to deepen our economic integration and create good jobs while catalyzing clean energy. Programs like the IRA, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and the CHIPS and Science Act create incredible opportunities for the United States and for Canada and Mexico to open new avenues for trade and manufacturing in clean energy and to strengthen regional supply chains, which are the lifeblood of our economies. The bold-face headline is that U.S. programs are not just about American companies. Canadian companies are directly benefiting from these funding and investment opportunities. One example, Canadian company Graphite One was awarded $37.5 million from the Department of Defense under the Defense Production Act through the IRA to support the development of its graphite mine in Alaska. These funds will help support increased critical minerals in North America for Canada and the United States. More recently, on October 13th, President Biden announced that 7 regional clean hydrogen hubs have been selected to receive $7 billion in bipartisan infrastructure law funding to accelerate the move to low-cost clean hydrogen. At least 3 Canadian companies stand to benefit from the announced funding, with Enbridge participating in the Mid-Atlantic Hub, which is centered in my hometown of Philadelphia, TC Energy in the Heartland Hub, and Alta Gas in the Pacific Northwest Hub. So our two countries have built a partnership that is an incredible advantage to both our nations. Whether you're referring to our continuing economic advancements, our long-standing cooperation to defend the democratic rights and freedoms we share, or the numerous other ways in which we work together. The U.S.-Canada partnerships benefits not only our people, but also the rest of the world. And by working together, there is nothing we cannot achieve. So I'm going to close with one of my favorite quotes from President Biden's address to Parliament in March. Canada and the United States can do big things. We stand together, do them together, rise together. We are going to write the future together, I promise you. I think those words capture how I feel about the U.S.-Canada relationship, about our friendship, our partnership, and our future. So I look forward to working together with Canada to secure a more prosperous and safe future for our countries and for the world, and I hope that you all will join in that effort. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Very inspiring speech. As the Ambassador is taking his seat now, it's my privilege to now introduce our moderator, Denise Ciele. Denise is a leading public affairs professional here in Ottawa who's worked across national, provincial, and local governments with industries, nonprofits, and is a regular political analyst that many of you will have seen on TV and heard on your radio. Passionate about service, Denise has served as a president of the Canadian Club here in Ottawa, on the TELUS Community Board and the Algonquin College Foundation. She's been a top 40 under 40 and has been named as one of the top 100 most accomplished Black Canadian women in Canada. Please join me in welcoming Denise to the stage for a question and answer session.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us, Ambassador, and for your remarks. And so you say 2 years, 120,000 kilometers here in Canada, and you inferred that a critical part of your mandate, I think you used the word thrust of your mandate, is to restore trust between our two countries. The question I want to ask you about that, is this about getting back to the age-old relationship, or is there new considerations? Is there something new here?
Well, on the trust quotient, it's about getting back to where we were, because I think without trust, you don't have a platform to be able to move forward. I think the result of building back trust is the opportunity to work not only on things that we worked on previously, but to work on new things. So 10 years ago, nobody was talking about critical minerals, just by way of example. And so if we rebuild the trust, if we put ourselves back in the position where we're favored partners, where we're closest friends, closest allies, it then positions us to work together to take our economic activity, our trade activity, our work together on defense, our work on intelligence to new levels and to reach new horizons.
New horizons, and you know, one of the things that, of course, Canadians and Americans always know is that we're so connected. We're connected economically, socially, in some cases politically, and our foreign policy outlooks are often the same. And in reflecting on President Biden's visit and in discussions with the discussions that he was having publicly with Prime Minister Trudeau, there was this idea about a shared commitment to global challenges and, of course, the reiteration of their commitment to United Nations, G7, G20, NATO, the WTO, the Five Eyes. We're aligned on so much as Canadians and Americans, and I want to put this question to you, but where do we differ?
So I think I prefer, I'm going to take a step back. The way you asked the question is right, but I think that all derives from a shared set of values that our two countries have, of values for the value of democracy, of a shared set of values for the equality of all of our people, a shared set of values for everything that democracy stands for. And on that, I think there's no light between our two countries. Within that umbrella, there may be different approaches that we have to accomplishing those objectives. And I've tried to reflect on a good example of something significant where there's a meaningful departure in approach. And frankly, I can't think of one. I think on all the important issues in the world, the United States and Canada, tend to approach those issues in the same way. Does not mean that our tactics are always the same. So we're both committed to a net zero future. We're both committed to addressing climate change as a core value and as a core priority for our countries. But Canada has chosen, at least until this last week, to use the carbon tax as a principal method to accomplish those objectives. I don't mean to be snide. I mean, Canada's chosen to use the carbon tax. The United States is not using the carbon tax. We don't agree with that tactic. That doesn't mean we disagree on the ultimate objective. It doesn't mean that we have any criticism of Canada for using the carbon tax in that way. And it doesn't mean that Canada has any criticism of us for not using the carbon tax. It is a different approach to trying to address the same issue. I'll give another example that is one of my favorite examples, which in my opinion runs 100% in Canada's direction, which is both countries have a shared commitment to gender equity in leadership. There was a great back and forth on the President's visit that both the President's cabinet in the United States and the Prime Minister's cabinet in Canada are at least 50% women, and President Biden generously and accurately said that he was following Prime Minister Trudeau's example when he made sure that his cabinet was 50% female. But the passion that both these leaders have for gender equity, the role of women in the workplace, again, there are some tactical differences. And so Canada has chosen to address one of the principal causes of lower female participation in the workforce and lower sustained female participation in the workforce that might impact being around long enough to be in leadership, and that is to provide universal, affordable, or free child care for everyone in the country. And Canada is now in the second year of an effort to roll out that universal national child care program. President Biden was in favor of that, but could not get it adopted. And so the United States has one of the worst governmentally supported child care programs in the developed world, and Canada has one of the best. And there are already studies that are demonstrating that that program is increasing female participation in the workforce and is beginning to move more women to leadership positions in the private sector, which is helping to equalize the pay gap that exists between women and men in Canada. So one example on each side of different approaches to attacking the same problems.
Yeah, absolutely, and as you mentioned, as President Biden said, we do right and we do well together. To go back to, you expressed some concern about North American energy security, and specifically you mentioned China's significant influence in this space, and I think if I got what you said, quote, our reliance on geopolitical unreliable countries. So you referenced the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, and Canada's critical minerals strategy. You know, do you see these as making a significant difference, or is it just simply a step in the right direction?
So I think the school is still out definitively on that, but I think there are very few people who don't agree that the IRA and the Defense Production Act and the U.S. programs that have been put in place are making a meaningful difference already. In fact, you hear a lot of conversation in Canada that these programs are so big and have the potential for such great success that Canada has had to be stimulated into making investments and designing programs to compete with the United States programs. So I don't think that's a bad thing, by the way. The United States never said we're going to solve this program by ourselves. A good program that we have, I think it's good for Canada to copy it and to put it in place, because you'll just spread the overall impact that it's having. And again, I always like to make the point that a program like the IRA, which is the largest climate-related program in the history of the United States, and I think in the history of the world, that you don't have to be an American company to benefit from the IRA. Already been Canadian companies that have benefited from that. So I think we're already seeing real impact from those programs, and I think we will find a continuing significant impact from programs like the IRA and the Defense Production Act.
All right. Well, let's talk CUSMA or USMCA for a little bit. And so it's scheduled for trilateral review in 2026. Are there sectors that you can point to that have benefited? And I think maybe more importantly, the sectors where there will need to be reassessments in terms of that trilateral review?
So that's an important question. I prefer to look at CUSMA, since I'm in Canada. I measured my travel in kilometers. Since I'm in Canada, I'll call it CUSMA. United States, we call it USMCA. But I think I prefer to look at the overall structure and the environment that is created by CUSMA. An opportunity for free trade between the three companies with a built-in dispute resolution mechanism that I think provides certainty and facilitates cooperation and appropriate competition across all sectors. Frankly, I mean, I think it's the largest sectors that experience the biggest benefit just because they're the largest sectors. And so I'm going to say the automobile sector is an obvious example. Doesn't mean we agree on everything. It doesn't mean that we don't have disputes under CUSMA about whether programs that we're trying in the United States or programs that are being tried in Mexico or Canada are consistent with the provisions of CUSMA or USMCA. There are disputes, but there is a dispute resolution mechanism that gives the countries the opportunity to have their disputes adjudicated and does not distract from the overall quality of the trade relationship, the partnership, and the friendship that exists in particular between Canada and the United States.
Thank you. Let's dig into one of those sensitive areas. And we talk about trade liberalization in the service sector. And experts, some experts at least, that I have been reading have suggested that it will require agreement between Canada and the U.S. on very sensitive issues such as taxation on digital advertising, privacy protection, and the protection of domestic suppliers of news and other content. Can you reflect on that?
So I always appreciate when you ask me questions. I'm still waiting for the softball. So that's one of the whole digital sphere is one of the thorniest and most difficult issues precisely because it's new. I mean, the digital world is just different than the historical world. I'm not sure I agree that the Canada and the United States have to have agreement on many elements of regulation of the digital space. I mean, there's one clear example where Canada is proposing a digital services tax, which the United States strongly opposes. That will be an area of contention unless it is resolved. So that's a place where we're going to need to reach some type of an agreement. The Canadian position, by the way, is not crazy. We want to be clear about that. I think the preference that Canada has, the United States has, is that we adopt the global treatment of tax, including digital tax, in a framework that's been proposed by OECD. And many countries around the world have adopted interim digital taxation plans which have been grandfathered in the OECD structure. And Canada is simply saying, well, we don't have one of those programs that's been grandfathered. We support the OECD framework, but if the OECD framework isn't adopted globally, including by the United States, by January 1st of 2024, then we have no choice but to proceed to protect our economy with a digital services tax. So the United States thinks digital services tax are discriminatory against United States companies. The United States does not support those types of country-by-country programs. And what the United States has asked, and many other countries, like I think almost all other OECD countries other than Canada, is for an additional year or two to try and put the OECD framework in place. So there's a place where we're either going to have agreement or we're going to have a big fight. Privacy, I think, is a different space. Lots of countries have different privacy regimes. I think it's important to protect privacy. In the United States, we don't even have a single privacy regime in the country. Many of our states have different privacy regimes than other states and have different privacy regimes than the federal government, which does not have a universal privacy regime. So I don't know that we're going to have to agree on a privacy regime to continue to grow our digital economies. The News Act issues are very current, very fluid, very complicated. And that's, of course, the Canadian legislative scheme where they put in place a mechanism for certain digital companies to have to compensate news organizations for the use of their news on their digital platforms. The United States has not taken a formal position on whether we agree or disagree with that. It has obviously created some significant controversy within Canada between the Metas and the Googles and the Canadian government. But again, I don't think that that's the kind of issue that the United States and Canada are going to have to agree on to be able to move forward in a digital economy and in a digital world.
Thank you. Let's
Didn't
talk.
I do well with that without taking a
Yes,
position without taking a position on which side was right? Sorry.
Yeah. So news headlines and images are really impactful, and the emotions, and we saw when you were talking about Israel, the deep emotions. And in your remarks, you said, we stand with the state of Israel unequivocally. President Biden said that as well. And you said, we support equal measures of justice and freedom for Israelis and Palestinians alike. What does that mean?
So look, this is not a new issue. The problems between Israel and Palestinians, you could argue, have gone on for centuries. So I still remember, and actually still remember the famous picture of Bill Clinton with his arms around Yasser Arafat and Shimon Peres when they signed the first set of accords. And although I was not present, it was reported to me that the president actually had to exert significant pressure on the back and shoulders of both men to get them to move within hailing distance of each other for that famous photo. It's actually one of my favorite photos, which I have an autographed Bill Clinton. I have a copy of that photo that's been autographed by Bill Clinton. So although that structure hasn't survived, that structure continues to form the basis for a lasting peace in the Mideast. And all I'm saying is what the president has said, which is, in the end, we can't keep having terrorists in control of the destiny of the Palestinian people. We can't keep having wars that flare up. We can't keep having civilians being butchered by terrorists in this battle. We have to figure out a lasting peace. And the President and Secretary of State Blinken have articulated the continued United States support, which, by the way, is also supported by Prime Minister Trudeau in Canada, for a so-called two-state solution. And that is a lot of details to be worked out, sort of simple phrase, two-state solution, but that is the only structure that we know of to create a lasting peace that allows the Palestinian people and the Israeli people to coexist and to survive and to move forward, and that is what I was referring to.
Thank you. So back to you having traveled to all of the provinces, and you're making your way up to the territory's favorite province.
So I might have been asked that question before, but I don't want this answer to seem practiced. But what I always say is that I refuse to answer that question because it will only get me in trouble. And I say this, it's a little bit like asking me, which is your favorite child? I mean, I'm not going to pick among my children, and I'm not going to pick among the provinces of Canada. If you let me tweak the question, I will tell you that my most inspiring visit was to Gander on September 11th, and to meet the people of Gander. To meet the people of Gander and have the opportunity to thank them in person for what they did for fellow American citizens who were scared to death. You had 7,000 Americans were in Gander on September 11th. They had no idea what was going on. They had no idea how they were going to get home. And the people of Gander, actually the people of Atlantic Canada, opened their homes and their hearts to them. And to meet with those people, and when I said to them, what you did was so extraordinary. I mean, there were people who would run into an American on the street, and they say, how are you doing? He'd say, oh, we really need a shower. And they would say, my address is so-and-so. I never locked my door. Go ahead and take a shower. The towels are in the closet. I mean, they literally opened their homes to them. I said, what caused you to do this? And they said, anyone in the same position as we are would have done the same thing. And I said to them, I wish that was true, but it isn't. You are an extraordinary people, and there's just no doubt to me that that was the most inspiring visit for 2 or 3 days, spending my time with the people of Gander.
Thank you. One last question. Use all of your diplomatic chops and skills on this one, Ambassador. The Toronto Maple Leafs or the Ottawa Senators? Because we know the Stanley Cup is coming back to Canada.
So I've learned enough, but by the way, you left an important team out, the Philadelphia Flyers. Because the answer is the Flyers, but I've learned enough to know that Toronto is the biggest city in Canada, so it has the most fans, but it is also the city and the team that many Canadians love to hate. So I live in Ottawa. So in Canada, my home team is the Ottawa Senators. Yeah. And so I'm not bashful about saying I'm a Senators fan, except when they play the Flyers.
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador, for your time this afternoon and for sharing with us much about what friends, partners, and allies looks like and how Canada and U.S. Cooperate in this changing global world. Thank you very much, Ambassador.
Thanks for doing a great job with this. Thanks, everyone.